No one imagined that humble Ebony would dare to face an impossible diagnosis, threatening corporate investigations, and the shadow of crushing debt to achieve her greatest dream, becoming a mother. When all seemed lost, an unimaginable twist revealed that she was expecting not one, but 3 babies. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. Ebony Davis tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and glanced at the clock hanging above the office door. She had planned to leave work right on time, but the sudden influx of last-minute clients and her boss's request for extra paperwork delayed her. Now she was running late for the fertility research fundraiser, an event she wasn't even sure she should attend. The thought of walking into a room full of wealthy strangers in elegant attire set her nerves on edge, yet her best friend Tasha had insisted. There might be new scientific discoveries, Tasha had said, that could give Ebony the sliver of hope she never thought possible. She stepped out into the evening light, the sky tinged with pink and orange. Her purse slipped from her shoulder and nearly spilled onto the concrete. As she bent down to adjust the strap, a handful of overdue bills peeked out, reminding her of how precarious life had become. She tucked them away quickly, trying to forget the mounting debt. Tasha's name flashed on her phone screen, so she answered, pressing it to her ear with a trembling hand. "Girl, I already know," Ebony sighed. "I'm late. I'm going." She listened to Tasha's lilting voice encouraging her, offering last-minute moral support. Tasha's confidence never wavered, and it made Ebony's chest tighten with gratitude. "Just be yourself," Tasha said brightly. "If there's even a tiny chance you can learn something about a new treatment, it'll be worth it." Ebony mumbled a quick thanks and ended the call. She hailed a taxi, jumping in with a flutter of nerves. As the car weaved through traffic, the bright lights of the city's upscale district came into view. Glass buildings, designer boutiques, restaurants with tinted windows hiding well-dressed patrons. She glanced down at her own simple outfit, silently hoping it was at least presentable enough to avoid stares. When she arrived, the entrance to the event venue glowed with chandeliers. A red carpet rolled from the door out onto the sidewalk. Her pulse quickened at the sight of well-heeled guests stepping out of sleek cars, greeting each other with air kisses and polite laughter. Ebony took a steadying breath. She felt painfully out of place. Inside, she found Tasha near the lobby. They shared a quick hug, and Ebony admitted how uncomfortable she felt. Tasha scanned the room, not unlike an excited tourist taking everything in. The sparkling decorations, the posh attendees, the polished waitstaff gliding around with trays of champagne. Ebony stuck to water. She couldn't afford champagne, even if it was free. "Let's just watch the opening video," Tasha suggested, leading her toward a large screen where a promotional reel about fertility research started playing. Ebony's eyes lingered on images of mothers cradling babies, couples smiling in hospital rooms, doctors in white coats beaming at their successful breakthroughs. A soft ache bloomed in her chest. Since her teens, Ebony had carried a bleak diagnosis. Her chances of motherhood, doctors had said, were virtually non-existent. The memory stung. She recalled her grandmother's small kitchen, the hum of the old refrigerator, and the doctor's letter in her trembling hands. The heartbreak had taken a long time to dull, but it never fully disappeared. Standing now in a gilded ballroom, Ebony felt the ache come roaring back, yet she couldn't deny a spark of curiosity about any new research that might exist. A cluster of guests shifted in her direction, and Ebony instinctively drifted toward the far wall. She watched as Tasha mingled, exchanging smiles and handshakes, ever the social butterfly. Ebony, on the other hand, found herself awkwardly cradling her water glass, unsure whom to approach or what to say. Everyone seemed to know each other. Conversations danced around her. People praised the foundation for its cutting-edge fertility work, swapped success stories, and hinted at the possibility of bigger breakthroughs on the horizon. She tried to gather the nerve to talk to someone, anyone, but a swirl of anxious thoughts stopped her. The cost of these treatments had to be astronomical. She was drowning in debt as it was. Maybe she was chasing a pipe dream. With a glance at Tasha still chatting away, Ebony decided she'd quietly slip out and spare herself any more awkwardness. She could return home, nurse her insecurities alone, and let Tasha enjoy the rest of the event. Careful not to disturb anyone, she maneuvered around a table laden with brochures and donation forms. That's when she noticed a tall man in a tailored suit stepping through the crowd with a stack of papers. He looked focused, scanning the room as if searching for someone. Ebony slowed her pace, trying not to bump into anyone, but it was no use. She accidentally collided with him, catching him at an angle that sent the documents flying in all directions. "Oh my goodness!" Ebony gasped, dropping to her knees immediately to collect the scattered pages. Her face burned with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry. I'm so clumsy." The man knelt down too, his voice calm if a bit startled. "It's fine, really. Let me help." She gathered the documents one by one, noticing graphs, charts, and official-looking letters. The man glanced at her with curiosity, and Ebony finally recognized him. She'd seen his face on the event's promotional material. Liam Thompson, the main speaker and the founder of the Fertility Research Foundation. With her heart thudding, she handed him the sheaf of papers, fumbling to straighten them into a neat pile. I'm Ebony," she stammered, feeling a need to introduce herself. "I'm here. Well, I came to learn about your research. My friend convinced me." Liam gave her a kind smile. "Glad you made it, Ebony. Don't worry about the documents. They're all intact. I was just on my way to the podium." She stood up, smoothing her outfit, still mortified. "I'm not usually this clumsy. It's just a hectic evening. I'm late and—" "I understand," Liam replied, straightening his tie. "If you have questions, I'll be around after my speech. I hope you'll stay." Before Ebony could promise anything, a sudden commotion erupted near the entrance. Raised voices echoed across the marble floor, and a crowd began moving toward the doors. Tasha appeared at Ebony's side, eyes wide with concern. Across the room, security personnel hurried forward, forming a barrier. "Are those protesters?" Tasha whispered, craning her neck to see. "I heard there might be some group opposed to this type of research, but I didn't think they'd actually show up." Ebony watched as a small but vocal group of activists started chanting slogans about unethical science and corporate greed. Their shouts grew louder, rattling the stately ambiance. Guests scattered, some ducking out of the way, others pulling out phones to record the chaos. Liam's face tightened. He clutched the papers to his chest, scanning the scene. Ebony felt an urge to help, even though she had no real role in this gala. But if there was any risk that information about new treatments might be lost or destroyed by the protesters, she wanted to protect it. She hurried after Liam, her adrenaline surging, all thoughts of a quiet escape forgotten. Tasha stayed close behind as Ebony kept an eye on the protesters who pushed past the entrance. Security guards shouted, trying to keep order. The tension in the air was electric, full of accusations, demands, and fear. Ebony ducked behind a pillar when one protester tossed a flyer toward her. She caught a glimpse of a man in a hoodie gesturing angrily at anyone in a lab coat. Somewhere in the commotion, Ebony saw Liam stooping down to rescue a stray folder. She made her way over to him, braving the push and pull of the crowd. Her pulse thundered in her ears, each heartbeat resonating with a mix of apprehension and purpose. She knelt beside him on the floor, helping gather files and pamphlets. His eyes flicked up to hers, and in that moment, Ebony sensed how critical these documents were to him. "Thank you," he said breathlessly, standing again. "We need to get this to a safe spot. Are you all right?" She nodded, hugging the handful of materials to her chest. "I'm fine, just—" Her gaze swept across the swirling confusion of guests and protesters. "This is intense." Liam nodded, lips pressed thin. "I'll have security escort you out. This is going to get worse before it gets better." Ebony felt Tasha grip her elbow. They started weaving away from the crowd when, at the edge of her vision, Ebony spotted a glossy piece of paper lying on the floor. Bright colors and bold lettering caught her eye. Something about an experimental fertility trial. She paused, stooping to retrieve it, the rest of the world momentarily receding into the background. The pamphlet was from Liam's foundation, detailing cutting-edge procedures and potential breakthroughs. As she scanned the first few lines, a swirl of cautious hope mingled with disbelief. The words "clinical trial" jumped out. She clutched the pamphlet, pressing it to her side as if it might vanish otherwise. Tasha urged her forward, and Ebony hurried alongside her as security pushed the protesters back. But new waves of angry voices surged from the doorway. Through the shouting and frantic footsteps, Ebony's heart pounded with more than just fear. She understood how slim her chances really were, given her finances and her medical history. Yet something about the pamphlet, with its promise of possibility, stirred her soul. A security guard placed a hand on her shoulder, guiding her toward an exit. Tasha trailed behind, occasionally glancing over her shoulder at the crowd. Ebony could still see Liam in the distance, struggling to keep everything contained. The building rumbled with chaos, lights flashing, the overhead speakers crackling uselessly. She wondered if she should run back and help or simply follow Tasha out the door. Then she noticed it. The single sentence about the procedure's success rate, typed in bold letters across the top of the pamphlet. It wasn't high, but it was there, and that tiny number, small though it was, represented more of a chance than she had ever been given before. She hesitated, taking one last look around. Alarmed voices, scuffling footsteps, and the bright glare of cameras all merged into a blur. Her grip on the pamphlet tightened. Maybe Tasha had been right. Maybe Ebony really did need to come here, to see for herself that there was a narrow, fragile path forward. Just as Ebony contemplates leaving the chaotic scene, she notices a particular pamphlet on the floor, one detailing an experimental fertility treatment funded by Liam's foundation. She picks it up, hope flickering in her eyes, just as the protesters break through the doors with raised voices. Ebony's pulse hammered as the protesters forced their way inside, voices raised in alarm and anger. She clutched the pamphlet, eyes flicking between the crowd and Liam Thompson, who was still attempting to gather loose papers scattered across the glossy floor. A cluster of security guards formed an uneven line between the activists and the guests, trying to minimize damage, but already the evening had descended into chaos. Tasha grabbed Ebony's wrist and pulled her aside, urging her to keep moving. "Come on!" Tasha hissed, gesturing toward a narrow side corridor. "We're not getting out through the main door." Ebony's mind spun. One minute she was half convinced to leave and never look back. The next, she was in the middle of pandemonium, helping to salvage important documents. She held tight to the ones she'd just scooped from the floor. The overhead lights flickered, giving everything a strobe-like effect. More shouts echoed from the front entrance as the protesters pressed forward. A tall man near the door raised a placard denouncing "playing God with fertility," while behind him another banged on the doorframe. Liam ducked around a marble column, scanning the room until his gaze fixed on Ebony and Tasha. He lifted a hand, beckoning them to follow. "This way!" he shouted over the clamor. "We'll slip out through the back!" Without waiting for a response, he took off, weaving past a startled server who was hastily setting down a tray of tumbling glasses. Ebony and Tasha hurried after him, doing their best to dodge jostling shoulders and stomping feet. One protester lunged forward, grasping at the papers in Liam's hands, but Ebony stepped between them without thinking. A surge of hot adrenaline flashed through her as she pressed herself against the protester, struggling to keep him from grabbing anything. "Back off!" she shouted, voice tighter than she intended. Her eyes locked with the man's for a split second, long enough to see the anger etched onto his face. Then a security guard arrived, pulling him away. Ebony exhaled in shaky relief, adrenaline still thrumming through her veins. Tasha looped an arm around Ebony, pulling her farther down the hallway until they found themselves behind a closed door labeled "Staff Only." Inside, they paused to catch their breath. The hallway lights here were fluorescent and harsh, making everything look cold and clinical, a stark contrast to the glittery ballroom they'd left behind. Liam carefully checked the documents in his hands. "All accounted for?" Ebony asked, noticing his anxious expression. He gave a quick nod, though a line remained between his brows. "I think so. We can't risk losing any of this. Some of it details new treatment options, confidential stuff that protesters or rival companies would love to get their hands on." A muffled clamor seeped in through the walls. Ebony felt her heart still beating at a frantic pace. "Are there always protesters at events like this?" Liam looked down at the sheaf of papers. "Sometimes. Fertility research can attract strong opinions." "Tell me about it," Tasha muttered, rubbing Ebony's shoulder. "Come on, let's get out of here while we can." They followed Liam deeper into the hallway. Around a corner, a wide service corridor stretched before them, leading past storage rooms and eventually to a fire exit. Outside, the night air hit them like a wave of relief, though Ebony still felt remnants of panic in her tightened chest. Tasha pointed. "My car's over there." A cluster of protesters stood near the main doors, but they'd apparently not reached this side of the building. Ebony exhaled, grateful that a direct route to Tasha's little sedan seemed clear. Liam paused, glancing at the rumpled pamphlet in Ebony's grasp. She realized she was clutching it so tightly that her knuckles were white. "I see you found a copy of our clinical trial info," he said, voice strained but warm. "If you're interested, we're having an open house at the Foundation later this week. It might answer a lot of your questions." Ebony hesitated, feeling an unexplainable wave of self-consciousness. She wanted to ask 1,000 questions but didn't know where to start. She simply nodded, forcing a small smile. "I'll think about it." "Good." Liam gave her a lingering look of gratitude. "Thank you for helping tonight. Be careful heading home." Tasha opened the driver's side door, beckoning Ebony in. Liam turned and hurried away, heading for another exit where, presumably, his own car or driver awaited. Ebony watched him go, realizing she was still breathing too fast. She slid into the passenger seat, nerves buzzing like radio static. The moment Tasha hit the road, the adrenaline come-down began. Ebony sagged against the seat, arms and legs heavy with fatigue. They drove in silence for a block before Tasha spoke. "That was intense," she said quietly, flicking on the turn signal. "You okay?" Ebony gave a weak nod. "I guess so. It was all so sudden. One minute I'm about to leave, the next I'm practically saving top-secret documents from an angry mob." "Yeah, well, you definitely spiced up your evening." Tasha tried for humor, but her tone remained laced with concern. "What was that pamphlet Liam mentioned?" Ebony smoothed out the paper on her lap, the neon lettering advertising experimental fertility treatment visible under the passing streetlights. She explained the few lines she'd read, how the treatment was cutting edge, the success rates, the mention of high costs. She swallowed, her voice turning soft. "You know my finances, Tasha. I can't afford groceries most weeks. How could I possibly pay for something like this?" Tasha shrugged. "Who knows? But maybe it's worth at least hearing them out. You never know if there's a scholarship, a grant, or some sponsor program." Ebony sighed, folding the pamphlet carefully and tucking it in her purse. "I can't deny that tonight gave me a little hope. The way Liam looked when he mentioned the research, like it really mattered to him. I don't know." They fell into a pensive silence as Tasha steered through the quieter part of the city. Streetlights cast fleeting gold pools on the pavement. Ebony stared out the window, half lost in the memory of bright chandeliers and anger-fueled protesters. Her thoughts swirled. Her debt, her job, her grandmother's declining health. She had no room for more chaos in her life, and yet the possibility of motherhood, no matter how slim, kept flickering in her mind. Tasha cut into her reverie as they pulled in front of Ebony's apartment building, an old brick structure in need of repairs. "You sure you'll be okay? It's late." Ebony mustered a small smile. "I'll be fine. Thanks for tonight." After a brief hug, Ebony stepped out into the dimly lit street. She had to sidestep a few loose pavers on the sidewalk before climbing the creaky steps to her unit. Once inside, she flicked on the lamp in her living room. Its glow revealed a pile of unopened mail on the battered coffee table, more reminders of overdue bills. The fridge hummed loudly, nearly empty except for a carton of milk and a half-eaten container of noodles. She sank onto the worn couch, prying off her low heels and letting out a long breath. On the table, she placed the pamphlet face up, letting the letters stare back at her. In the quiet of her living room, she recalled every second of the collision with Liam, the chaotic scramble for his documents, the surging tide of protesters. Most of all, she remembered the earnestness in his voice when he spoke about the research. It seemed personal to him. Maybe she should find out why. The night stretched on as she tried to distract herself with a favorite TV show. Her eyes flicked to the pamphlet every time a commercial aired, that small promise of a miracle both seductive and daunting. Despite her exhaustion, Ebony found it hard to sleep. The emotional roller coaster from the event still weighed heavily on her mind. Finally, she closed her eyes on the couch just for a minute, she told herself. She drifted somewhere between waking and dreaming, the images in her head an odd mixture of bright lab coats, angry crowds, and the gentle hush of a newborn's cry she'd once heard in a hospital hallway. A warm flutter of longing bloomed in her chest, and a single tear slid down her cheek. She was startled awake by the loud buzz of her phone. Heart pounding, she fumbled to read the screen, noticing the time. It was past midnight. The caller ID displayed an unknown number which made her nerves twinge. She stared at it for a moment, debating whether to answer. When the phone buzzed a second time, she slowly brought it to her ear. "Hello?" she said softly, voice rough from nearly drifting off. No answer. A low hiss of static filled the silence. She almost hung up, thinking it might be a glitch or a robocall. Then a cold, mechanical distortion crackled on the line like someone speaking through a digital filter. "Don't get involved with Thompson." The call cut off. Ebony sat there, phone in hand, heart thumping like a drum. The words echoed in her ears, sharp, threatening, and echoing the danger she had sensed back at the fundraiser. She stared at the black screen, mind whirling with questions. Who was warning her to stay away from Liam, and why? Late at night, Ebony's phone lights up with a call from an unknown number. When she answers, there's only silence, until a clipped electronic voice warns her, "Don't get involved with Thompson." Ebony woke the next morning to a flood of sunlight and the persistent echo of that unnerving phone call. She reached for her cell, scrolling through recent calls just to make sure it hadn't been a bad dream. "Unknown number," the screen displayed, reminding her that a real voice, cold and distorted, had warned her to stay away from Liam Thompson. No explanation, no further details, only that single, ominous warning. She stared at the screen for a long while, trying to make sense of it all. Why would anyone care about her involvement with Liam's foundation? She hardly knew the man, let alone had any sway in his business. And yet, between the dramatic protest at the gala and this anonymous call, she sensed a bigger story unfolding in the shadows. The shrill ring of her phone startled her. This time it was Tasha, bright and urgent. Ebony answered with a shaky breath. "You okay?" Tasha's concern bled through each word. "I've been thinking about you all morning. You sounded freaked out last night." "I'm still rattled," Ebony admitted. She hesitated, deciding whether to mention the call, but Tasha already knew about it. "It was so bizarre, Tosh. They told me not to get involved with Liam, but I don't even know him." Tasha's voice grew firm. "You sure you're still going to the open house at his foundation?" Ebony's gaze traveled to the pamphlet on the coffee table, its bright letters proclaiming experimental fertility treatment. The memory of those protesters outside the event still made her skin crawl, but there was also the image of new possibilities. "Yes," she said softly, "I need answers, and if there's even a chance this treatment can help me, it's worth the risk." Then just be careful, Tasha said. Keep your eyes open, and if you see anything weird, call me right away. An hour later, Ebony found herself on a city bus heading toward the tall glass building that housed Liam's foundation. The ride was quiet except for the hiss of hydraulics each time the bus stopped. She peered out the window at the passing streets, a tangle of bustling crowds and rows of gleaming offices that felt a world apart from her cramped apartment. Her hands trembled a little when she climbed off at the designated stop, the looming building reflecting the midday sun in mirrored walls. Stepping into the sleek lobby, she took a moment to steady herself. The floors were polished to a high shine, and tasteful green plants added softness to the otherwise modern decor. A smiling receptionist handed her a visitor's badge, reminding her of the open house schedule, tours of the lab, a Q&A session with the research team, and a short welcome from Liam himself. Ebony managed a polite smile and pinned the badge to her blouse. She joined a small group gathered by the reception desk, each person there with hopes or curiosities about the treatments offered. The atmosphere felt lighter than the tense chaos at the gala, though Ebony caught herself glancing over her shoulder more than once, half expecting to see someone lurking. As the group moved forward, she followed into a corridor lined with large windows that revealed sterile yet brightly lit labs. Inside the labs, scientists bustled around stainless steel tables. Some calibrated instruments while others examined slides under microscopes. One researcher with gentle eyes explained in everyday language how the experiments being conducted aimed to improve fertility treatments with fewer side effects. Ebony listened intently, quietly absorbing each fact. She noticed a row of photographs on a wall display, happy couples holding newborns, their smiles wide with joy. A title in bold letters announced, "Our Success Stories." Her throat tightened. Even though she'd long carried the burden of infertility, seeing these faces brimming with gratitude threatened to pierce through her protective shell of resignation. She wanted to feel that joy too, to cradle a baby of her own someday. A swirl of longing and unease flooded her. She couldn't help but question whether she would be the next success story or just another cautionary tale buried under hospital bills. "Everyone still with us?" The lab guide's voice broke through Ebony's thoughts. He signaled the group to proceed to the next station. Ebony trailed behind, glancing at the photos one last time. They arrived at a more sophisticated research space where machines hummed and beeped in rhythmic pulses. Pipelines of data scrolled across glass monitors. The guide pointed out a new scanning technology that helped doctors assess a patient's reproductive health more accurately. Ebony marveled at the innovation, half disbelieving that such advanced work was happening in her city. As she rounded a corner to follow the group, she almost collided with Liam Thompson. He was deep in conversation with a pair of lab technicians, but paused when he saw Ebony. A hint of relief or recognition flashed across his face. "Good to see you made it," he said, speaking low so as not to disrupt the others. "How's everything? Are you safe?" Ebony swallowed, choosing her words carefully. "I'm all right. Still shaken about last night, and someone called me afterward, told me to stay away from you." Liam's expression grew serious, concern furrowing his brow. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, stepping aside so they weren't blocking the hallway. "I never intended for you to get caught up in anything dangerous." "I don't understand why I'm a target," she whispered. "I'm just trying to figure out if this treatment could help me." His gaze flicked to her visitor's badge, then back to her eyes. "I'm glad you're here. If you want more details, maybe we can talk in my office. I can also answer any questions about costs or trials." Ebony hesitated, then nodded. "All right." He guided her down another hallway lined with frosted glass doors. One of them opened into an office with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a calm, manicured courtyard. The space felt modern, yet intimate. A few personal photos on the desk, a framed painting on the wall. Once they were inside, Liam offered her a seat and a glass of water before settling behind his desk, careful not to seem imposing. "Tell me what's on your mind," he said, leaning forward slightly, elbows on his desk. Ebony fiddled with the edge of her visitor's badge. "I've had a diagnosis since my teens that says I probably can't have kids. But the older I get, the more I realize I can't give up hope. When I saw your brochure, I thought maybe you had something new to offer. But I don't have money for expensive procedures. I can barely keep up with my own bills." Liam listened quietly, a sympathetic expression in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I know how devastating it can be to hear doctors tell you it isn't possible. I also lost someone close to me who struggled with infertility. Her dream of being a mother was something she never got to realize. That's why this cause is personal for me." Ebony's breath caught. She could see the flicker of pain behind his calm demeanor. It spoke of loss, of a wound not fully healed. She wanted to ask more but sensed it wasn't her place. He slid a plain blue folder across the desk. "Inside are details about our experimental protocols, potential success rates, timelines, and approximate costs. There are grants available, but they're limited. If you decide to move forward, we can discuss your eligibility." Ebony took the folder, absorbing his words. The chance for motherhood beckoned, but the financial burden loomed like a dark cloud. She was about to thank him when she noticed a tall, stern-faced man appear in the doorway. The man's gaze cut sharply to Liam, and Ebony felt tension coil in the air. "Mr. Thompson," he said, voice clipped. "We need to speak. Now." Liam's jaw tightened. "I'll be there in a moment, Harris." Harris cast a quick, dismissive glance at Ebony before stepping away. She heard the faint echo of his footsteps as he retreated. Liam sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Sorry about that. He's an investor. Or he was, at least. My company is facing a lot of pressure from people who want quick results, not breakthroughs that take time and resources." Ebony stood, clutching the folder in her hand. "I won't keep you. Thank you for this information." He stood as well, a faint crease marking his forehead. "Let me know if you have any more questions. And be careful." Outside Liam's office, she walked to the lobby alone, the weight of the new folder heavy under her arm. The hum of the building's ventilation system was strangely loud, or maybe that was just her pounding heart. She passed a few employees, each focused on their own duties, and for a moment she felt invisible in a place buzzing with so much activity. After returning her visitor's badge at the reception, Ebony stepped outside. The sun had shifted lower in the sky, painting the glass windows in soft oranges and golds. She paused at the sidewalk, letting the light warm her face. Despite all the research optimism inside, reality struck. The cost, the potential for heartbreak, the anonymous threats. It was like standing at a crossroads, unsure which path would lead to a future she could live with. She started walking, a swirl of pedestrians flowing around her. Somewhere behind, she thought she heard footsteps matching her pace. She quickened her steps, feeling the hairs on her arms prickle with unease. When she glanced back over her shoulder, she caught a glimpse of someone darting behind a street vendor's cart. Her pulse hammered, confusion and worry jarring her every move. Was she imagining it, or had someone really followed her? Distracted, she nearly collided with a woman carrying groceries. The woman shot her an annoyed look, and Ebony mumbled an apology. Heart pounding, she hurried on, desperate to reach the crowded safety of the main avenue where at least anonymity might shield her from whoever might be lurking. Finally, she stopped at a corner, forcing herself to breathe normally. She tried to rationalize away her fear. After all, it could be a coincidence. People were always on these streets, some in a rush, others wandering aimlessly. But the warning voice on the phone refused to leave her thoughts. She took her phone out, checking for any new messages. Nothing but a string of missed calls from unknown numbers. Her gaze darted behind her once more, but if someone had been watching, they were gone now, swallowed by the pulsating flow of city life. As Ebony reaches the street, she checks her phone. Her bank app flashes a new overdue notification, and she wonders if she's chasing an impossible dream. Then she notices someone following her from a distance, vanishing into the crowd when she turns. Ebony peered out her front window, squinting against the pale morning light. Her thoughts still buzzed with the image of that lurking figure disappearing into the crowd the night before. She checked the street again, searching for any sign of a stranger lurking in the shadows, but it looked like a regular day unfolding in her quiet neighborhood. A jogger trotting past, a dog barking somewhere, and the occasional car rumbling by. Still, she felt a prickle of unease at the back of her neck. Her phone chimed. She turned away from the window, only to spot something taped to her apartment door. Heart-sinking, she stepped out and pulled off a paper that read, "Final Notice," in bold. An eviction warning. She glanced around the hallway, cheeks burning with shame, then retreated inside. The flimsy walls of her cramped living space seemed to close in on her a little more. She took a shaky breath, mentally preparing herself for the day ahead. Moments later, her phone vibrated again, this time showing the caretaker's number. Ebony braced herself and answered. "Ebony?" came a familiar voice, soft but edged with concern. "Your grandmother isn't doing so well. We've noticed she's having more trouble moving around on her own. She's been coughing a lot, and I think she might need a doctor's visit soon." Ebony sagged against the wall, eyes fluttering shut. "I'll come see her tonight. Thank you for letting me know." When she finally left for work, she was already behind schedule. As if drawn by magnetism, her gaze returned to that eviction notice lying on the small table. She tucked it under a stack of old letters, hoping to forget it for just a few hours. The outside air felt cold, and she clutched her jacket tight around her body, trying to steel herself for another day. By the time she hurried through the door at the company where she worked as a receptionist, her boss, Mr. Phillips, was already standing by her desk, glancing pointedly at the clock. He didn't bother waiting for an explanation. "You're late, Ebony," he said, voice clipped. Again. She struggled to offer a placating smile. "I'm sorry. There was an emergency call about my grandmother." His mouth tightened. "Personal issues aside, you have a responsibility to be on time. This is unacceptable." A few curious colleagues peeked over their cubicles. Ebony's cheeks flamed, but she swallowed hard and nodded. "I understand. It won't happen again." She settled in at her desk and switched on the computer, the weight of her boss's disapproval lingering like a heavy cloud. Near lunchtime, exhaustion tugged at her. She'd barely slept the night before, her mind replaying the swirl of possibilities around Liam's offer of a fertility consultation, the thought of corporate sabotage, the threat calls. She rubbed her temples, battling a dull throb behind her eyes. Tasha appeared by her desk, carrying a to-go cup of coffee. "You look like you need this," she said, offering Ebony the hot drink. "Heard you got chewed out again." Ebony's eyes brimmed with gratitude. "Thank you. Yeah, it's been a rough morning." They slipped into the break room where Ebony stared at the shabby table, trying to summon words for everything happening in her life. Tasha placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Talk to me." After a reluctant pause, Ebony admitted everything. The eviction notice, her grandmother's failing health, the threat calls warning her to stay away from Liam. She even mentioned how she'd glimpsed someone possibly following her after leaving the foundation. "That's too much on anyone's plate," Tasha whispered, sympathy clear in her tone. "But you can't give up on the fertility treatment if it's something you really want. At least schedule a consultation, learn your options." Ebony nodded absently. Memories from her teens drifted up, unbidden. She recalled sitting in a cramped doctor's office at 19, hearing the words that shattered her world. "Your chances of ever having a child are extremely low." Back then, she'd tried to bury the pain under college assignments and part-time jobs. But that wound never fully healed. Back at her desk, Ebony saw a message flash on her phone. Liam's name appeared on the screen. She tensed. He'd texted her a straightforward question. "Have you thought about scheduling an appointment with Dr. Ramirez?" Ebony read it twice before slowly typing a response, then erasing it. She couldn't bring herself to hit send, uncertain whether she should dive deeper into these experiments or cut ties before her life got any more complicated. Another ping grabbed her attention. A co-worker, Lucy, was leaning on the partition separating their desks, smirking. "You look cozy with that phone. Talking to your rich friend?" she asked in a sing-song voice. Ebony bristled, trying to keep her tone neutral. "It's just a friend." Lucy arched an eyebrow. "Word around the office is you're after a billionaire's wallet. Didn't think you were the type." Ebony felt her stomach twist. "I'm not after his wallet," she snapped, more sharply than intended. She forced a polite smile. "Excuse me, I have work to do." The jab lingered, her cheeks flushing with anger and embarrassment. She hated rumors, hated that people thought she'd stoop to something so hollow. This was about a chance at motherhood, not money. Yet anxiety gnawed at her. She was so broke, after all. Would people ever believe she was sincere? By evening, Ebony felt drained. She arrived at her grandmother's assisted living facility with groceries, an attempt to help out. The familiar antiseptic scent in the lobby reminded her of quiet, lonely nights. She found her grandmother in a small room, propped on pillows, eyes closed in rest. At Ebony's gentle knock, the older woman blinked awake and smiled faintly. "There's my girl," Grandma rasped, voice laced with fatigue. "You work too hard, dear. I can see the worry on your face." Ebony set down a bag of fresh fruit and cereal. "I'm fine, Grandma. How are you feeling?" "Just old," her grandmother teased lightly. "Don't worry about me." But Ebony could see the pain etched in the lines around her eyes. She promised to check back soon, ignoring the guilt that gnawed at her for not being able to offer more help. Her grandmother's medical bills already piled high, and Ebony hadn't even paid off her own rent. Outside, the evening sky was stained with streaks of violet and deep blue. Tasha pulled up in her small car, waving from the driver's seat. Ebony got in gratefully, sinking into the passenger seat with a sigh. "I figured you could use a ride," Tasha said. "I stocked you up with a few groceries, too. They're in the back seat." Ebony's eyes misted over. "You didn't have to do that." Tasha squeezed Ebony's hand. "You'd do the same for me." Later, at home, Ebony sat in her living room, flipping through the thick dossier Liam had given her. It detailed timelines for hormone treatments, possible side effects, and staggering price ranges. Her throat constricted. Even with the possibility of a grant, it felt impossible. Yet she couldn't tear her eyes away from the page describing success stories with women who'd once been in her shoes. Out of nowhere, her phone buzzed. She snatched it up, expecting maybe Tasha with a last-minute comfort text. Instead, her screen displayed another unknown number. Her pulse skipped. With a trembling finger, she opened the message. "Stay away from Thompson or you'll regret it." Anger flashed within her, mingling with anxiety. She tossed the phone onto the couch, burying her head in her hands. How had she wound up in such a nightmare? All she wanted was a chance for something she'd been told her entire life was out of reach. Finally, she calmed her pounding heart enough to pick the phone back up. She found Liam's number in her texts and pressed the call button before she could change her mind. After 2 rings, his voice came through, surprisingly soft. "Ebony, everything all right?" he asked. She swallowed, her throat dry. "Not really. I just got another threatening message." "I'm sorry," Liam said, genuine worry in his tone. "Let me help. Can we schedule your consultation soon? I can speak with Dr. Ramirez about a more flexible payment plan. At least see what's possible. No pressure, but I don't want you dealing with these threats alone." Her chest tightened with conflicting feelings, fear, caution, but also gratitude. "Yes," she whispered. "Let's do it." They agreed on a tentative date, Liam's voice steadying her frayed nerves. After hanging up, Ebony closed her eyes and pictured a child's face, the faint dream of a family that seemed only a heartbeat away, yet impossibly distant. Just then, a sharp knock at the door echoed through the apartment. Ebony startled, nearly dropping her phone. She crossed the small living room to open it and found a stern-looking courier holding out an envelope. The words, "Urgent Debt Collection," leapt out in bold letters. Ebony thanked the courier and tore the envelope open with trembling fingers. Inside was a grim statement that threatened garnishment of her wages if she didn't pay her outstanding debts immediately. A knock at the door interrupts Ebony's thoughts. When she opens it, she finds a legal-looking envelope from a debt collector. Inside is a stark warning that her wages could be garnished, pushing Ebony dangerously close to a breaking point. Ebony woke up far too early, her mind too loud with worries to allow for any real rest. The debt collector's ultimatum kept replaying in her head, overshadowing everything else. She wondered how she could possibly afford an experimental fertility treatment when her wages might soon be garnished. She ran a hand over her face, staring at the dim ceiling and feeling the weight of her financial troubles pressing down on her chest like a heavy stone. Despite her exhaustion, she managed to get dressed and leave for work, determined to push through yet another day. Inside the bus, her gaze drifted across blank, somber faces. Sometimes she felt like she lived in a different world than everyone else, a place where every decision came chained to consequences she couldn't escape. As she scrolled absently through her phone, she spotted the text from Liam, a reminder about her consultation at the foundation scheduled for that afternoon. She exhaled, the swirl of anxiety and hope inside her intensifying. When she arrived at the office, she found Mr. Phillips glaring her way. Thankfully, she was on time, so he couldn't scold her about punctuality. Still, his expression reflected what everyone else in the small workspace already sensed. Ebony's life was in turmoil. She hurried to her desk and dove into the day's work, taking one call after another, eyes glued to the clock, willing it to move faster. Her break couldn't come soon enough. Finally, midday rolled around. Ebony grabbed her purse and slipped out the door, ignoring Lucy's smirk as she passed. Outside, she hailed a cab, deciding that a direct ride would be the quickest way to Liam's foundation. Every second in that car felt weighted. Her mind bounced from the threat messages to the eviction notice to the empty bank account that left her with few options. She fiddled with a pen in her purse, tapping it against her knee in a restless rhythm. The cab pulled up to the sleek glass building. Ebony paid, reminding herself to keep track of every penny spent. Easy to say, though. She glanced at the entrance, the midday sun glinting off the reflective doors, making her squint. As she stepped through into the lobby, a feeling of déjà vu washed over her. Marble floors, neutral-toned walls, clusters of people discussing advanced research in hushed voices. It was the same place where she'd learned just how tantalizing and expensive her hope could be. A friendly receptionist directed her to Dr. Ramirez's office on the second floor. Ebony took the elevator, each floor's passing chime rattling in her ears. When the doors opened, she followed the neat corridor until she reached a small waiting area. A lone potted plant stood in the corner, and the hush of recirculated air draped the hallway in a sterile calm. "Ms. Davis?" a nurse in lilac scrubs called from a nearby door. Ebony rose and followed the nurse into a consultation room outfitted with sophisticated medical equipment. Monitors and charts lined one side, while in the center stood a plush chair next to a compact examination area. A slender man in a white coat turned, smiling warmly. "Ebony, right?" he asked, extending a hand. "I'm Dr. Ramirez. Liam told me a bit about your case. Please, sit." Ebony settled into the chair, trying not to let her nerves show. Dr. Ramirez wore a gentle expression, and he spoke in a steady, measured tone that eased some of her tension. He began by asking about her medical history, the circumstances surrounding her teenage diagnosis, and any current treatments she'd tried. She explained everything, the heartbreak of seeing doctor after doctor, each one confirming the same bleak forecast. Her chances of conceiving naturally hovered near zero. Dr. Ramirez took notes on a tablet, nodding occasionally, though his eyes flickered with sympathy. "I'm going to be honest," he said softly, tapping the screen once more. "Traditional methods haven't been effective for you, and yes, your case is considered high risk. but we've made strides in certain hormone therapies, and your age is still on your side. The experimental protocol we're running may give you a chance." A subtle warmth lit Ebony's chest at those words. You have a chance. It was the phrase she'd needed to hear for so long. But as soon as the doctor mentioned costs, medications, frequent tests, lab fees, her heart sank again. "I don't know how I'm going to pay for any of this," she whispered, twisting her hands together. I'm facing some financial trouble already." Dr. Ramirez nodded, his voice staying calm. "We do have limited grants and potential scholarships. Liam and I can try to see what's available for you, and if the foundation's budget allows, we might subsidize part of the treatment to make it more affordable." Her shoulders loosened a fraction. "Thank you," she managed. "You have no idea what that means." He offered a small smile. "I have an idea. Believe me. I've met many women in your situation. It's never just about biology. It's about finances, emotions, social pressures. It's a lot. But we'll help however we can. Of course, you should know about the risks too. Hormone therapy can be intense, physically and mentally, and there's no guarantee you'll end up pregnant." Ebony's eyes drifted to the shining instruments on the counter. "I understand." The nurse took a small tube of blood for preliminary tests, and Dr. Ramirez assured Ebony they'd be in touch soon with results. He encouraged her not to lose hope, but also to be realistic about the road ahead. Exhausted yet strangely buoyed, Ebony thanked him and made her way back to the lobby. The sense of relief from having an actual plan, no matter how shaky, filled her chest. Perhaps, just perhaps, a genuine chance at motherhood lay within her reach. She stepped through the doors out onto the sidewalk, the late afternoon sun painting the building's glass panels in streaks of gold. Liam stood near the curb, arms folded, scanning the street for a cab. He brightened when he spotted Ebony. "How'd it go with Dr. Ramirez?" he asked, tone hushed with concern. She expelled a shaky breath. "Better than I expected." He explained the next steps, costs, and that there might be grants. Liam gave a nod, relief flickering in his eyes. "I'll do all I can to help, I promise." Just then, a man in a hooded jacket appeared at the corner, glaring in their direction. Ebony instinctively stiffened, but by the time Liam turned, the figure had melted into the stream of passers-by. Ebony told him about the strange presence, and Liam's jaw tensed. "I'm sorry you've been caught in the middle," he said. "I suspect someone's trying to scare you away, or maybe scare me. Don't let them succeed." The warmth of his words bolstered her. Ebony wanted to believe that no matter the threat, they could outlast it. She hesitantly asked, "Why would someone do all this? What do they have to gain?" Liam met her gaze. "Sometimes big pharmaceutical interests clash with independent research. Sometimes it's just misguided activists. But either way, we won't let fear stop us." They parted, Ebony making her way to the bus stop with a swirl of anxiety and cautious optimism in her heart. She called Tasha, recounting the appointment highlights in a hushed, eager voice. Tasha cheered her on. "It's about time something positive happened," she said. "I'm proud of you." That evening, Ebony reached her apartment feeling drained but hopeful. She paced the living room, replaying Dr. Ramirez's words. A chance. A maybe. She was well aware a maybe could be devastating if it failed. But after all these years, maybe felt like more than she'd ever dared to dream. Perhaps it would be worth the sleepless nights, the financial juggling, the intimidation from unknown forces. She set a pot of water to boil for pasta, the only meal she could afford until her next paycheck, and checked her phone for updates about her grandmother. Nothing. The caretaker's last message was from days ago, urging Ebony to check in. She made a mental note to visit again soon, guilt tugging at her heart. She felt like she was juggling so many disasters: her grandmother's declining health, looming debt, threats from a hidden enemy, and the possibility of her entire life changing if the treatment worked. After dinner, She sat at the tiny kitchen table, bills and medical pamphlets spread out before her. She was so lost in numbers and deadlines that she nearly jumped out of her skin when her phone vibrated with an incoming text. The number looked unfamiliar again. Her hands shook as she opened the message, heart hammering in her ears. The words drained the color from her face. If you proceed with the treatment, it won't just be your money at stake. Someone might get hurt. Ebony found herself staring at the message on her phone, heart hammering in her chest. If you proceed with the treatment, it won't just be your money at stake. Someone might get hurt. It felt like a knife blade of guilt and terror slicing through her hopes. She clenched her jaw, refusing to let a faceless threat dictate her choices. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a friendlier notification, Tasha's name lighting up the screen. Ebony answered, trying to keep her voice steady. "Hey, girl," Tasha said, sounding upbeat. "Just checking in. You okay?" Ebony swallowed, forcing herself to breathe. I just got another message." A pause. "They said somebody could get hurt if I keep going." A rush of air crackled through the line. "What? Ebony, this is crazy. Have you told Liam?" She ran a trembling hand over her face. "Not yet. It just came in. But I'm not backing down, Tash. I've come this far." Tasha's voice dropped to a firm whisper. "That's my girl. Don't let these cowards scare you. But you do need to be careful. Let me know the second anything else happens." They hung up, and Ebony felt a surge of relief that at least she wasn't alone in dealing with this. The next morning, her nerves still buzzed like a high-voltage line, but she forced herself to get dressed and head to work. Her boss pounced on her the moment she stepped inside, complaining about some overdue files and reminding her she couldn't keep missing deadlines if she wanted to stay employed. Ebony forced an apologetic smile, burying the stress under her professional facade. She spent the morning typing up documents, fielding calls, and occasionally pausing to glance at her phone, half expecting another threatening text. Tasha checked in periodically, giving Ebony supportive nods or winks when they passed in the hallway. It was a small office, so rumors spread quickly. Ebony overheard a coworker speculating that she was gold-digging again, but she tried to ignore it. She had a more important fight on her hands. When lunchtime arrived, Ebony found a voicemail from Liam, his voice tight with concern. "I've been talking to Dr. Ramirez. He thinks you're a good candidate for the early-phase hormone treatment, but we need to move fast. Call me." Her pulse kicked up. She stepped outside onto the street, found a semi-quiet alcove near the building, and returned his call. Liam picked up on the first ring. "Hey," he said, "glad you called. I've been working on a small grant application on your behalf. It's not huge, but if it's approved, it could cover a decent portion of the treatment." Relief flooded her. "You did that for me? You deserve a chance at this. And," he added with a gentle note in his voice, "it's also important for the foundation to help people who actually need the research we're doing. We can't let big investors be our only priority." Ebony's heart squeezed. She found herself smiling despite everything. "Thank you, Liam." He paused, then continued more carefully. "Listen, Ebony, you've been getting these threats, right? Are you okay?" She hesitated, scanning the street. Nobody seemed to be lurking, but that didn't mean they weren't out there. "I've received messages warning me to stay away from the treatment. Or from you. But I'm not going to quit." "Good," Liam said, sounding resolute. "We're aware some people want to disrupt the foundation, but I won't let them target you. Let me know if anything new happens." She ended the call feeling both shaken and motivated. At the office, she tried to bury herself in tasks, determined to keep the day from unraveling. By late afternoon, she'd managed to reconcile a stack of reports and send off important emails. Mr. Phillips grunted what passed for approval, though his stony expression reminded her she was still on thin ice. That evening, Ebony hopped on a bus to visit her grandmother. The caretaker had said there'd been more coughing spells and difficulty sleeping. Ebony's stomach twisted at the thought of her grandmother's health continuing to slip. Entering the small, familiar room, she found her grandmother propped against pillows, eyes closed. Ebony tiptoed closer, quietly placing a bouquet of cheerful daisies on the nightstand. The older woman stirred. "Ebony?" she murmured, forcing her eyes open. "You came." "Of course," Ebony whispered, sliding a chair closer. "How are you feeling?" A weak, warm smile curved her grandmother's lips. "Doctor says I need stronger medication. Don't you worry, though. I'll be fine." Ebony tried to play along, but her voice wavered. "You're the toughest person I know." They chatted about small things. The caretaker's new cat, a nice volunteer who helped with laundry. But then Ebony's grandmother took her hand, giving it a light squeeze. "What about you, my dear? You seem weighed down." A flash of raw emotion hit Ebony. She swallowed hard, revealing only a fraction of the truth. "Just bills, stress at work, you know how it is." Her grandmother's gaze flicked to Ebony's eyes and then lingered on the daisies. "I may not see so well anymore, but I can tell when my granddaughter's hurting. I hope you know I'm proud of you, no matter what." Tears stung Ebony's eyes. She blinked them back, leaning over to kiss her grandmother's forehead. "Thanks, Grandma." Outside in the corridor, Ebony closed her eyes to center herself, recalling Tasha's unwavering encouragement, Liam's unexpected kindness, and Dr. Ramirez's cautious optimism. So much of her life teetered on a knife's edge. She just had to keep going. Later that night in her tiny living room, Ebony reviewed a fresh email from Liam detailing the steps for applying to the Foundation's grant program. The figures were still daunting, but it was better than nothing. She typed away, answering each question about her financial situation, her personal story, her medical history. When finished, she hit send with trembling hands, as if her future hinged on every typed line. Time crept toward midnight. She felt drained and took a moment to recall her grandmother's words of pride. As if spurred by that memory, Ebony opened the thick folder from Dr. Ramirez and reread the sections on early-phase hormone therapy. The side effects sounded brutal: mood swings, fatigue, possible complications. But underneath the warnings was that word, possible. If the treatments worked, she might defy the doctor's dire predictions from all those years ago. A few messages popped onto her screen, one from Tasha, reminding Ebony she wasn't alone, and another from Liam, letting her know he'd mailed the grant application to the committee. He even included a personal recommendation, which made Ebony's heart swell with gratitude. Then came the text from an unknown number, a silent photo. Ebony's stomach flipped when she opened it. It appeared to be a blurry shot of her grandmother's building, taken at dusk. There was no caption, but the message was clear. Someone was watching. Her breath caught in her throat. Now they were threatening her loved ones. A swirl of anger, fear, and determination churned inside her. She forwarded the photo to Liam without explanation, then called Tasha. It was late, but Tasha answered on the second ring, sounding worried. "They sent me a picture of Grandma's place," Ebony managed, voice tight. "I'm so scared, but I won't let them win." "You won't," Tasha agreed fiercely. "We'll figure this out. Don't let them bully you into abandoning your dream." After the call, Ebony paced her apartment, thoughts racing. She worried about her grandmother, about how she could protect her if things escalated. She worried about the job she might lose if she took too many days off for treatments. She worried about the swirl of unknown enemies lurking in the dark. Yet behind every worry was a flickering spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, her life could change for the better. Somewhere past midnight, she collapsed onto her couch, exhaustion finally overtaking her. She closed her eyes, letting the day's tensions unravel. Despite the fear, she felt a deep resolve. She was stronger than she realized. She had to be. Just as Ebony steels herself for the journey ahead, Dr. Ramirez calls with urgent news. The preliminary tests show promising results, but Ebony must begin the treatment immediately if she wants any real chance. Ebony awakened to the sharp beep of her phone alarm, heart thrumming with a restless energy. Dr. Ramirez's urgent message still echoed in her mind. She had to begin treatment immediately if she wanted a real shot. There'd been no time to second-guess the decision. Her lab results showed just enough viability to make her a candidate, and to hesitate now would mean missing that narrow window. She barely slept that night, imagining every worst-case scenario. Yet beneath the worry, a small spark of hope refused to go out. That morning, she slung a tote over her shoulder, stuffed with paperwork, granola bars, and a water bottle. She arrived at the Foundation's clinical wing under the glare of overhead fluorescent lights. A nurse directed her to a modest exam room. Dr. Ramirez greeted her with a calm warmth, explaining each step of the hormone injections. Ebony watched him prepare the syringe with shaky hands, her teeth pressed into her lower lip. When the needle pierced her skin, she winced but forced herself to stay still. It was only the first injection of many she'd need in the coming weeks. Leaving the exam room afterward, she felt a swirl of emotions, part anxiety, part relief. She clutched a small packet of instructions on dosage, potential side effects, and numbers to call if anything went wrong. Her head felt heavy with too much information, but she tried to focus on one essential truth. She was finally taking a real step toward motherhood, something so many had deemed impossible. She had just stepped into the Foundation's airy lobby when Tasha arrived, face lit with encouragement. "You did it," Tasha said in a hushed tone, pulling Ebony into a brief hug. "First day done. How do you feel?" "Honestly?" Ebony replied, exhaling shakily. "Scared out of my mind, but weirdly hopeful too." Tasha patted her hand. "One day at a time. Let's celebrate with a nice cup of tea." They headed toward a small cafe area off to the side of the lobby. But before they could even peruse the menu, Ebony sensed a tense murmur rippling through the staff. Two men in business suits strolled in from the front doors, flanked by someone Ebony recognized as the short-tempered investor she'd seen in Liam's office before. He shot Ebony a dark glance, then pivoted to confront a lab technician, voice low and intense. She couldn't make out all his words, but phrases like behind schedule and lack of tangible results filtered across the room. Tasha's hand slipped around Ebony's elbow. "Looks like business trouble," she whispered. "I think that's the investor who threatened to pull funding." Before Ebony could respond, a voice hissed from behind. "So you're the one taking advantage of Mr. Thompson's generosity?" A woman in her late 30s stood there, arms folded, eyes pinned on Ebony with open hostility. Ebony froze, an icy flush creeping up her neck. I'm not sure what you mean." The woman stepped closer, voice dripping with accusation. "We all see it, how you're milking Liam's sympathy. He's bending over backwards for you, but people like you never do anything without expecting a payday in return. You're just using his resources for a free ride." Fury and shame mingled in Ebony's stomach. She glanced around, catching sight of a few onlookers, including a receptionist who had paused mid-phone call. Tasha tensed beside her, eyes snapping with anger. "That's enough," Tasha said firmly, but the woman kept going. "Do you have any idea how many patients are vying for limited spots here?" she barked. "We keep hearing about you, the one who's broke, the one who's messing everything up, the one who—" "Stop!" Ebony finally burst out, voice trembling. She struggled to hold on to the swirl of conflicting emotions. "I'm not milking or using anyone. Liam offered to help me apply for grants just like he would for any other patient who needs it." The woman sneered, stepping forward again, and Tasha shifted, positioning herself between them. "Hey, back off," Tasha warned, her tone protective. For a tense moment, Ebony feared the confrontation might spark an actual fight. Blood pounded in her ears. But then 2 security guards came rushing over, drawn by the raised voices. They asked everyone to calm down. The woman gave Ebony one last withering glare before storming off, muttering something about Foundation freeloaders. Tasha let out a disbelieving laugh, though her eyes held more fear than humor. "What is wrong with people?" she said quietly. "You're not doing anything wrong." Ebony's shoulders slumped. The hormonal rush from her injection, combined with the emotional gut punch, made her feel nauseated. She mumbled a thanks to the guards, but tears pricked at her eyes. She hated feeling this vulnerable in front of strangers. "Come on," Tasha murmured gently, guiding Ebony down a corridor. "Let's find somewhere quiet." They slipped into a small staff lounge, currently empty. Ebony sank into a chair, elbows propped on her knees, eyes blurred with tears she was determined not to shed. Tasha handed her a paper cup of water from a nearby dispenser. "I can't believe this is happening," Ebony whispered, voice ragged. "I thought maybe the biggest threats would be from that shadowy person sending messages, not from people right here in the Foundation." Tasha rubbed Ebony's back, a protective fury in her gaze. "Ignore that woman. She's clearly got her own issues. Focus on your goal." Ebony nodded shakily, sipping water. She could feel the hormones coursing through her, heightening every emotion. A short while later, she dabbed her eyes and forced a small, wry smile. "Thanks, Tash. Sometimes I just need a little meltdown." They left the lounge, Ebony now determined to salvage her day. She clutched the instructions from Dr. Ramirez, vowing not to let intimidation ruin her path. The corridor led them back to the main entrance, where Ebony found Liam pacing near the security desk, evidently fresh out of a heated conversation. The stern-faced investor she'd seen earlier was nowhere in sight. Liam spotted Ebony and hurried over, worry etched in his face. "I heard there was an argument with one of the staff. Are you okay?" Ebony exhaled. "I'll live. She accused me of using you for money. It got heated." His eyes hardened. "I'm sorry. I don't tolerate that kind of hostility. I'll address it personally." "Thank you," Ebony said, touched by his sincerity. She tried to push away the sting of the earlier confrontation. "How's everything else? I saw some investors storming around." Liam grimaced. "They're threatening to withdraw funds if we can't show progress soon. This research isn't an overnight process, but big donors want immediate results." He raked a hand through his hair. "It's a lot." Ebony felt a pang of empathy. Under all his polish and optimism, Liam was juggling enormous pressures. She recalled Dr. Ramirez mentioning how critical those funds were, not just for her treatment, but for countless other patients hoping for breakthroughs. A pang of guilt tugged at her, wondering if she was part of the reason the investors were getting impatient. "I hate that you're in this position," she offered softly. "You've done so much for me already." He shook his head. "I want to help. That's why I started this foundation in the first place. Don't ever think you're a burden, Ebony." Tasha cleared her throat, stepping forward with an encouraging smile. "Ebony, maybe we should head out and let Liam deal with all this. You need rest after your injection." "Right," Ebony agreed. Her emotions still felt scrambled, and exhaustion tugged at her body. They exchanged goodbyes, Ebony promising Liam she'd keep in contact with Dr. Ramirez about any side effects. Outside, the afternoon sun felt harsh, and Ebony squinted, realizing how drained she truly was. The confrontation, the injection, the stress at work, it was enough to leave anyone shaky. Tasha drove Ebony home, quietly offering extra support. Once there, Ebony trudged upstairs to her cramped apartment. She tossed her tote onto the couch and sank down next to it. Briefly, she considered rummaging through the refrigerator for dinner, but her appetite was gone. Instead, she reached for her phone to scroll through messages. She found one from her grandmother's caretaker. "She's having another rough day, Ebony. Let us know if you can come by soon." Another wave of guilt washed over her, followed by an intense longing to make everything right. That evening, Ebony managed to prepare a light meal, forcing herself to eat a few bites. Then she took her next prescribed dose of medication, following Dr. Ramirez's instructions like clockwork. The hormones sent prickles of heat through her body. She tried to distract herself with a TV show, but her thoughts kept drifting back to that moment in the Foundation lobby when she was publicly called a freeloader. Her hands balled into fists at the memory. Night fell, and Ebony, worn out from the day, finally crawled into bed. She hoped that tomorrow would be gentler. Yet sleep didn't come easy. She tossed and turned, mind spinning with anxious scenarios, losing her job, disappointing Liam and Dr. Ramirez, letting Tasha down and facing the angry calls and texts from shadowy figures. Every fear collided in a swirl of half-formed nightmares. Eventually, sheer exhaustion overpowered her anxious thoughts. She felt herself drifting into uneasy rest, her limbs heavy. The phone buzzed at her side, but she almost didn't have the energy to pick it up. Still, some instinct made her reach for it. When her eyes locked on the screen, she saw Liam's name in a short text. "We need to talk. The investors are threatening to cut all funding unless we prove immediate progress." Ebony's eyes flew open in the early hours of the morning, the dim glow of her bedside clock revealing only a few hours had passed since she last checked the time. Liam's text still lingered in her mind. "We need to talk. The investors are threatening to cut all funding unless we prove immediate progress." She grabbed her phone from where it rested, half tangled in the sheets, and reread his words. There would be no more sleep tonight. That much was clear. By the time dawn arrived, she had dozed for just a handful of restless minutes. She threw on the most professional outfit she owned, a modest blouse and black slacks that had seen better days, hoping to look somewhat polished for whatever urgent meeting Liam might call. The Foundation's research was at stake, and she felt responsible somehow, even though she was just one patient. She promised herself she would do whatever she could to help. She made it to work long enough to tell her boss she had a medical emergency and would have to leave early. Mr. Phillips, though clearly displeased, only grunted. Ebony bolted from the office, ignoring the sideways stares of her co-workers. Outside, a crisp breeze ruffled her hair as she hailed a taxi to the Foundation's building. Her insides jittered with a mix of dread and determination. Liam was waiting in the lobby, pacing by the glass doors. When he spotted Ebony step inside, relief smoothed the tight line of his mouth. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," he said. His voice carried the strain of someone stretched to the limit. "Of course," Ebony replied. "What's happening?" He ushered her into a side hallway to avoid the curious looks of staff passing by. "Our biggest investor is threatening to pull out unless we can present strong near-term results. They want to see proof that the experimental treatments are working, or at least heading that way." Ebony's heart thumped painfully. "But these things take time. You can't rush." Liam nodded, jaw clenching. "I know, and Dr. Ramirez knows. But the investors aren't scientists. They're business people looking at spreadsheets and timelines." He reached into a folder, producing a few printouts detailing patient data. Ebony noticed graphs, charts, and technical stats she barely understood. "I'd hope to use your case as an example," he said carefully. "You just started the treatment, but the investors want to see any hint of progress or success. I'm not asking you to prove anything impossible, Ebony, but if you'd be willing to speak with them—" She met his gaze, understanding the enormity of his request. "You think hearing from a real patient might sway them?" "It might," he said quietly. "I'd never force you, but if you're comfortable, sharing your perspective could help buy us more time." Ebony clutched her purse strap. It was nerve-wracking, but if it could preserve the program that gave her a chance at motherhood, she had to try. "I'll talk to them." Before Liam could respond, his phone buzzed. A short conversation ensued, leaving him looking even more on edge. "The investors are in the conference room already. I'll introduce you when the moment's right." They walked briskly through the corridors. Ebony passed a reflective window and caught a glimpse of her own face, slightly pale, eyes underlined by faint shadows. She forced herself to straighten her posture. If she was going to speak up for her own dreams, she needed to look the part, confident, hopeful, deserving of this opportunity. At the end of the hall, large glass doors marked the entrance to the conference room. Inside, Ebony glimpsed a row of stern-looking men and women seated around a gleaming table, each with a laptop or stack of papers. Dr. Ramirez stood at the far side, posture stiff. When Ebony entered with Liam, the low hum of conversation ceased. Liam gestured toward Dr. Ramirez, who began a presentation on the Foundation's latest data. Ebony slid into a seat near the back, trying to remain calm. She felt her pulse flutter in her throat. The projector displayed charts detailing how certain patients responded to hormone therapy. Dr. Ramirez explained the significance of each improvement, but Ebony could sense the investors' impatience. They wanted immediate outcomes, numbers that proved profitable success. Medical breakthroughs often didn't work on such a convenient timeline. At a certain point, one of the investors leaned forward, tapping a pen on the table. "That's all well and good, doctor, but these are incremental changes. We need a tangible success story, not just partial data points." His gaze swept the room, settling on Ebony. "Is this the patient you mentioned?" All eyes turned on her. Ebony's heart leapt to her throat, but she stood and tried to manage a polite smile. "Hello," she began, voice quavering. "My name is Ebony Davis. I started the hormone treatment a few days ago. I can't promise immediate results, but I can tell you what this research means to me. All my life I've been told I'd never be a mother. Your foundation is giving me my first real hope." She paused, gathering her courage. "I realize progress might not be fast or guaranteed, but it can't happen without resources and support. There are many people like me out there. We're not just statistics. We're people with dreams, families, and futures that your funding could create or destroy." Her words hung in the still air. A few investors exchanged thoughtful glances. Others remained impassive. Liam offered a barely perceptible nod, silently praising her effort. Then Dr. Ramirez wrapped up with closing remarks, thanking the investors for their continued collaboration. The meeting ended, and Ebony felt an odd swirl of relief and uncertainty, unsure if her speech had any impact. But no sooner had she stepped away from the table than a wave of dizziness crashed over her. She grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself, sweat beading on her forehead. Dr. Ramirez noticed first, rushing to her side. "Ebony, are you okay?" Liam asked, his voice rising in alarm. She tried to speak, but all she managed was a shaky gasp. Her vision tunneled, gray spots dancing at the edges. Suddenly, the conference room's polished floor seemed to tilt. She collapsed to her knees, senses overwhelmed by heat and disorientation. Someone caught her arm, preventing her from fully hitting the ground. A chorus of voices erupted, some concerned, others barking for space. Dr. Ramirez and Liam gently eased her to a lying position, Ebony's pulse thunderous in her ears. The overhead lights seared her eyes, and a flood of panicked thoughts tore through her mind. Had the hormones done this? Would this ruin the Foundation's image right when Liam needed a win? "Don't try to get up yet," Dr. Ramirez commanded, pressing 2 fingers to Ebony's wrist, measuring her pulse. He ordered a nurse to fetch a stretcher. Ebony was too weak to argue, tears slipping from the corners of her eyes in mute embarrassment. An investor stepped closer, staring down at Ebony like she was an unsettling experiment gone awry. Liam blocked the person with his shoulder, his voice calm but firm. "Give her space." Within minutes, Ebony was whisked to a nearby exam room. The nurse checked her vitals while Dr. Ramirez examined her carefully. Though still shaky, Ebony managed to sit up on the gurney, perspiration cooling on her forehead. "What happened?" she asked in a trembling whisper. Dr. Ramirez gave her a measured look. "It's likely a side effect from the intensified hormones. Low blood pressure, possibly dehydration, added stress. Let's run a few tests, but you need to rest. No more pushing yourself like that." A new wave of shame crushed Ebony's chest. "But the Foundation will survive," Liam finished, hovering at her bedside. His tone brimmed with reassurance. "Your health is more important." The exam results came back. Ebony was indeed run down, her body reacting strongly to the hormone regimen. Dr. Ramirez advised scaling back some dosages or taking a short pause, worried the next collapse could be worse. Ebony's throat tightened at the suggestion of pausing treatment. She'd barely started, and already it felt like her one shot was slipping through her fingers. "No," she said, pressing her lips into a thin line. "I know the risks, but I can't stop. Not now. If I give up, then what was the point of all this?" Dr. Ramirez frowned. "Ebony, we want you to succeed, but this is your health, your life." She swallowed, pain in her eyes. "I'd rather take the chance than live with regret. Please, Dr. Ramirez." He exchanged a look with Liam, who nodded, recognizing Ebony's resolve. After a long beat of silence, Dr. Ramirez sighed. "All right, but we'll adjust your schedule, and you have to promise me you'll watch for any signs of trouble." Ebony nodded, relief washing over her. She lay back against the pillow, arms trembling slightly. Liam offered her a tentative smile, his posture shifting as if some monumental weight pressed on his shoulders. Outside, in the corridor, Ebony could still hear murmurs of the investors regrouping, possibly deciding the foundation's fate. She squeezed her eyes shut, willing away the headache pulsing at her temples. Whatever came next, she wouldn't let one moment of weakness dictate the rest of her journey. She'd fight for her dream, no matter the cost. Despite the emergency, Ebony begs Dr. Ramirez not to stop the treatment entirely. She'd rather take the risk than live with regret. Ebony ends the day exhausted, but with a sense that she can't abandon this opportunity. As she lies in the exam room, swirling lights overhead, the faint echo of raised voices from the hallway hints that the outcome with the investors may be more precarious than anyone realized. Ebony stared at the ceiling of her small bedroom, morning light cutting a bright slash across the peeling paint. Her head still ached from the dizzy spell the day before, and she was torn between wanting to bury herself in the covers and the nagging duty to check on her grandmother. Dr. Ramirez had warned her about the potential impact on her health, and Liam's worried gaze lingered in her memory. Yet all she could think was that she had to keep going. Pausing the treatment now felt like admitting defeat, and that was a weight she couldn't bear. Forcing herself up, she showered, dressed, and headed to the bus stop. On the ride to her grandmother's facility, the city swept past in a blur. Ebony clutched her phone and scrolled through old photos, childhood shots with her grandmother, who'd held her hand through every challenge. A lump formed in her throat. She vowed to be there for her grandmother too, no matter how overwhelmed she felt. Upon arriving, she found her grandmother awake, propped on a small stack of pillows, though it was clear the older woman's breathing was labored. Ebony set a small plastic container of homemade soup on the nightstand, forcing a reassuring smile. "Morning, Grandma," she said quietly. "How are you today?" Her grandmother managed a weary chuckle. "Alive, dear. That's a start." She pointed at Ebony's face. "You look exhausted. Are these treatments wearing you out?" Ebony pulled a chair closer. "A bit," she admitted, carefully choosing her words. "I had a dizzy spell at the foundation yesterday, but I'm okay. It's just, there's so much pressure right now." Her grandmother's gaze softened with concern. "Pressure from who? The doctors?" Ebony hesitated, deciding not to mention the investors or the deepening threats. She didn't want to add to her grandmother's worries. "Just life," she said, brushing it off with a small laugh. "But I'll figure it out." She stayed for an hour, doing little things to help, adjusting pillows, refilling water cups, and sharing a few light stories about Tasha's latest antics. Before leaving, Ebony pressed a gentle kiss to her grandmother's cheek. The older woman's hand trembled in Ebony's grasp, but her eyes glowed with pride. That unspoken encouragement lit a spark in Ebony's chest, a reminder of why she couldn't give up. Back outside, Ebony caught sight of a silhouette at the far end of the block, a hooded figure just standing there, seemingly focused in her direction. Her pulse quickened. She willed herself not to panic, especially in front of her grandmother's building. Steeling herself, she strode firmly toward the bus stop, and by the time she glanced back, the figure had vanished. The cold dread lingered, though. Another reminder that danger lurked in the corners of her new reality. The ride to the foundation felt longer than usual. Ebony's phone chimed with a message from Tasha asking if she was okay. She typed a quick reply, "Yes, just stressed. We'll catch up soon." When she arrived and stepped into the airy lobby, the tension in the air was palpable. A handful of staff were engaged in hushed conversations, their expressions anxious. Dr. Ramirez spotted her first, ushering her down a corridor away from prying ears. "We need to talk," he said, guiding her into a small consultation room. Once inside, he lowered his voice. "I've been reviewing your latest test results. They show promise, Ebony, but you're at an increased risk if we keep pushing the hormone levels. Yesterday's collapse can't be ignored. Your body's sending warning signs." Ebony's heart sank, but her resolve stayed firm. "I'm not quitting," she said, arms folded. "We agreed we'd adjust the schedule, right?" Dr. Ramirez nodded, exhaling slowly. "Yes, I've made a revised plan. But if you experience anything like yesterday's episode again, I may have to pull you off the protocol altogether. I won't stand by and watch you endanger your life." Ebony swallowed, determined not to show fear. "All right," she said quietly. "I'll be cautious." With that settled, Dr. Ramirez led her to the exam room for the day's checkup. She changed into a patient gown and sat on the table, chilly air prickling her skin. The nurse took her blood pressure, temperature, and a few more vials of blood. Ebony tried not to wince, but her arm still felt bruised from the countless needles. As Dr. Ramirez withdrew a fresh syringe of hormone medication, Ebony's phone buzzed on the counter. The nurse glanced at it, then at Ebony. "Do you need to get that?" Ebony shook her head, fighting a swirl of nerves. "Not right now." She clenched her jaw, letting Dr. Ramirez administer the dose. Warmth coursed through her veins, and she did her best to keep steady. Afterward, she dressed and stepped out into the hallway, rubbing her sore arm. She nearly crashed into Liam, who looked more disheveled than usual. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes, and an anxious energy emanated from him. "Good timing," he said, though he didn't sound optimistic. "We just got word from the investors. Despite your talk yesterday, they're still threatening to pull the funds." Ebony's stomach dropped. What happens if they do? He ran a hand through his hair. "We lose staff, research stalls. The experimental program could shut down. And your treatment, along with it." The enormity of the situation crashed over her. She'd known it was bad, but hearing it spelled out stung. She recalled the menacing texts she'd received, threats to her safety if she continued. Now the financial threats loomed too. Every path ahead felt blocked by fear. "I won't let that happen," Ebony said, surprising even herself with the boldness in her voice. "Is there anything I can do?" Liam paused, weighing his response. "Right now, just focus on your health. We can't hold you up as proof of the program's success if it jeopardizes you." A bitter edge tinged his voice. "But I'll keep talking to potential donors, seeing if anyone can step in last minute." Ebony nodded, aware of his heavy burden. She gently touched his arm, and for a moment they shared a silent understanding. Neither wanted to fail the people counting on them. As the afternoon stretched on, Ebony felt the hormone side effects intensifying. A headache throbbed behind her eyes, and her limbs felt leaden, as though gravity had doubled. She guzzled water, tried nibbling crackers, and forced herself to rest on a break-room couch while Tasha offered sympathetic smiles. Yet Ebony refused to entertain doubts. She needed this, or everything she'd suffered so far would be for nothing. Toward late afternoon, Liam called an impromptu meeting for his staff in a small conference room. Dr. Ramirez, Tasha, who'd been helping with administrative tasks, and a handful of lab technicians squeezed into chairs. Ebony hovered at the back, too exhausted to speak much. Liam announced that the biggest investor, a corporation that had bankrolled a large share of the research, was officially pulling out. A stunned silence followed. Dr. Ramirez rubbed his eyes. Do we have any backup funding? Liam shook his head slowly. I've reached out to everyone I can think of. Some are interested, but none can move fast enough to bridge the gap we'll have in the next few weeks. He hesitated, glancing at Ebony. We may need a miracle to keep the experimental program alive. Ebony's emotions surged. Anger at the investors for putting profits over breakthroughs, guilt that she wasn't further along in her treatment, fear that she would lose this one shot at motherhood. Tasha squeezed her hand. They exchanged a look that said, "We'll fight this together." The staff dispersed, returning to their stations with grim resolve. Ebony lingered, unsure where to go. Dr. Ramirez gently urged her to rest again, cautioning that stress could make her dizzy spells return. Yet Ebony couldn't sit idle. She left the foundation to retrieve some medication from the pharmacy. On the way, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She nearly ignored it, but dread coiled in her chest, and she forced herself to check. The text read, "You can't save the foundation. Give up, or you'll lose more than money." Ebony's blood ran cold. She realized these threats might not just be about frightening her. Perhaps they were tied to the bigger financial saboteurs who wanted the research to fail. She swallowed back panic, resolved not to cave. By the time she returned to the foundation, darkness was falling outside, the lobby lights reflecting off polished floors. Tasha spotted her, beckoning from a corner. "Hey," she whispered, "I can tell you're about to drop." Ebony tried to smile. "Just need a minute." Tasha pulled her into a quiet corner near a set of potted plants. "Did you see your phone?" Dr. Ramirez texted, "There's some urgency about your latest tests." Confused, Ebony unlocked her screen. Indeed, Dr. Ramirez had sent a message. "Come to my office. Need to discuss results." Her heart hammered. The last time Dr. Ramirez had summoned her with urgent test results, it had led to the immediate start of treatment. Anxiety fluttered in her chest like caged birds. She told Tasha she'd be fine, then hurried to the doctor's office. Inside, Dr. Ramirez closed the door, face drawn. He held a folder with Ebony's name on it. "We have a serious problem," he said gently. "Your latest hormone levels are dangerously high. If you continue at this pace, you could suffer permanent damage. You're nearing a tipping point, Ebony, and there's more. According to an ultrasound, there may already be some complications impacting the viability of any future pregnancy." Ebony felt her world tilt. Everything she'd gambled on, the chance of motherhood, could be slipping through her fingers before it truly began. She sank into a chair, heart pounding, tears stinging the corners of her eyes. "So, what does that mean?" she asked, voice raw. "It means continuing might put you at a serious health risk," Dr. Ramirez said, his tone regretful. "You could lose your opportunity to conceive in the future altogether. It's not certain yet, but we have to be cautious." Ebony's breath caught. The heartbreak in her chest felt like a physical blow. She thought of all the nights she'd lain awake, dreaming of a child's laugh in a small, warm apartment. Now a doctor she trusted was telling her that fighting this hard might destroy even the faintest possibility of success down the line. She let out a shaky exhale. She wanted to scream, to cry, to cling to whatever chance remained. But the tears refused to fall. Dr. Ramirez set a comforting hand on her shoulder, his gaze filled with empathy. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I wish I had better news." With investors pulling out and her health on the brink, Ebony felt as though she was standing at the edge of a cliff, unable to see any solid ground ahead. She left the office in a haze, passing staff who darted sympathetic looks. Voices echoed in her ears about the foundation shutting down, about surging medical bills, about threats from unknown enemies. She had only her determination left, and even that felt precariously close to shattering. By the time she stumbled into an empty corridor, she gasped for air, tears threatening to spill. She glanced around, found no one there, and let out a quiet sob. Did she have the strength to keep going if it might cost her health or her life? And if she stopped now, how would she ever accept living out the rest of her days without fulfilling the dream she'd held onto for so long? She felt utterly cornered, with no solution in sight. As Ebony steps outside, a thunderstorm erupts, lightning flashing across the sky. She stands in the downpour, her phone ringing. The screen shows Liam's name. He's discovered a last-minute plan to save the research, but it will require one final leap of faith. Ebony braced herself against the heavy glass door as the thunderstorm roared on. Rain pelted the sidewalk in fat, angry drops, lightning splitting the sky in violent bursts of white. She stood there, breath fogging in the sudden chill, phone glowing in her hand. Liam's name flashed on the screen. Through the clamor of the storm, she pressed the device to her ear. "Ebony," Liam's voice was taut with urgency. "I've got a potential donor, a friend I reached out to last night. He's willing to swoop in and help, but it depends on one condition." Her heart hammered. She wiped rainwater from her brow, stepping beneath the building's sparse awning. "What do we have to do?" "He wants proof this research truly matters," Liam said. "He'll sign the check if we make this public. Show the world what's happening here, why these studies can't be shut down." Ebony's pulse quickened with equal parts fear and hope. "You mean a press conference?" "Yes. You'd have to share your story. Be open about what you've been through, including the threats and the sabotage attempts. If you can handle that, he'll provide enough money to stabilize the foundation for the next phase." Lightning streaked across the sky in a blinding flash, illuminating Ebony's face. She recalled the swirl of intimidation, the possibility of losing everything, and how the hope for motherhood had kept her going. If she could save the experimental program for herself and for all the others who might benefit, she couldn't refuse. She swallowed the lump in her throat. "I'll do it," she said. "When?" "Tomorrow morning," Liam replied. "We can't wait. The media's already circling, smelling a scandal with the investors pulling out. This is our shot to turn the story around." She glanced again at the storm, feeling raw determination flood her. "Send me the details." They ended the call. Ebony stared up at the bruised sky a moment longer, the thunder roaring like her own anxious heartbeat. Then she hurried off, determined to prepare herself, mind, body, and soul, for the next day's decisive moment. The next morning dawned gray and overcast, still damp from the night's storm. Ebony arrived at the foundation, hair neatly pinned back, wearing the best outfit she could piece together. She felt the weight of every worry pressing on her: her grandmother's health, her precarious finances, the looming threats, her own fragile body after weeks of hormone treatments. Yet her resolve was stronger than it had ever been. Liam welcomed her at the entrance, looking more composed than usual, though his tense shoulders and faint shadows under his eyes betrayed the pressure he carried. "Thank you for doing this," he said softly. "You're braver than you know." She gave a small nod, her throat too tight to speak. Together they walked through the lobby and into a large meeting room where rows of chairs faced a makeshift podium. Reporters milled about, and a handful of cameras were set up under bright spotlights. Dr. Ramirez stood to one side, arms folded, gaze flicking anxiously around. A short, distinguished man in a tailored suit, presumably Liam's donor friend, hovered near the back, scanning the scene with cautious curiosity. "We'll start with a statement from me," Liam whispered to Ebony, drawing her aside. "Then you'll speak. Tell them about your diagnosis, your journey, the threats. Let the world see that this research isn't just numbers or profits. It's lives." She nodded, moistening her dry lips. "I can do that." Liam stepped to the podium first. The cameras pivoted, flashbulbs flickering. In a clear, measured tone, he explained how the foundation was on the brink of losing key financial support due to investor impatience, and that they had a last-minute chance to secure new funding. He spoke of his personal drive to help those facing fertility struggles, mentioning that losing a loved one to a lifetime of failed treatments had fueled his commitment to this cause. Finally, he beckoned Ebony to join him. Her knees felt weak as she faced the microphones, scanning the sea of curious faces. She swallowed, then let her gaze settle on Liam's encouraging smile. With a calming breath, she began to speak. "My name is Ebony Davis," she said, voice trembling at first. "Since my teens, I've been told I'd probably never bear children. I grew up carrying that sentence like a weight I couldn't escape. Then I found the Thompson Foundation's experimental research, and for the first time, someone told me there might be a chance." She paused, pressing her lips together. "What I discovered was that breakthroughs don't come easy. I've faced intimidation, anonymous threats, and ruthless judgment from those who see me as a number in a ledger. But I'm not alone. This foundation is fighting for real people. People who want to have children, to create families, to hold hope in their hands after being told it's impossible." Emotion colored her words, and she could see some reporters leaning in, their skepticism replaced by genuine interest. A gentle hush fell over the room. Ebony steadied herself. "I'm still undergoing treatment, and there's no guarantee of success. But shutting down this research now would destroy the hope for me and for so many others. Please don't let fear or greed win." A sprinkle of applause broke out, cautious at first, then growing. The suited donor stood at the back, nodding in approval. Ebony exhaled. She'd laid her story bare for everyone, journalists, strangers, the entire city. As the conference ended, cameras lingered on her face, capturing the quiet dignity of a woman fighting for a dream. Over the next few days, the Foundation's phones rang non-stop. Public opinion began shifting in Liam's favor after Ebony's heartfelt testimony went viral across local news stations. Small donors emerged, offering whatever they could. Families who'd previously benefited from the Foundation came forward with gratitude. In the swirl of newfound support, the major donor finalized the large sum Liam needed to keep the research alive. The corporate investors' departure stung, but their power over the program diminished. In the midst of the excitement, Ebony almost forgot her next checkup. Then, early one afternoon, Dr. Ramirez called her, a rare note of excitement in his voice. "We got your latest results. I need you to come in immediately." A flash of déjà vu made her grip the phone tight. Every time Dr. Ramirez said those words, "come in immediately," it felt like doom. But he sounded happy, or at least not panicked, so she clutched at that hope like a lifeline. She arrived in his office, heart pounding in her throat. The doctor guided her to an ultrasound room where a new nurse offered her a comforting smile. Ebony lay back on the exam table, the hum of the machine filling the quiet. Tasha slipped in as well, giving Ebony a quick thumbs up from the corner. Then Dr. Ramirez applied the cool gel to Ebony's belly and guided the ultrasound wand across it. Time seemed to freeze as the screen flickered with shadowy shapes. Ebony stared at the grainy images, not entirely sure what she was looking at until Dr. Ramirez pointed out something, his eyes shining with wonder. "Ebony," he said gently, "there are 3 distinct heartbeats." Her pulse thundered. "3?" she echoed, voice shaking. "You mean triplets?" Dr. Ramirez nodded, a wide grin lifting his serious features. Tasha gasped, covering her mouth, while Ebony felt the world tilt. She was pregnant. Unbelievably, impossibly pregnant, and expecting not 1 or 2, but 3 babies. Tears sprang to her eyes, half disbelieving it was real. "But how?" Ebony whispered. "They said I could never, and now 3?" Dr. Ramirez placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Sometimes even the best doctors can't predict how the body will respond. The hormones, the protocol, it worked beyond our expectations. Of course, carrying triplets is high risk. We'll need to monitor you very closely." A swirl of joy and trepidation flooded Ebony's chest. She blinked back tears, thinking of her grandmother, of the painful years of hopelessness, of Liam stepping in to give her a chance. Her own trembling heartbeat joined the flutter of tiny pulses on the screen. By evening, the news spread through the foundation like wildfire. Staff, those who'd once eyed Ebony with suspicion, instead offered congratulatory hugs. Liam caught her in the hallway, relief and delight mingling on his face. "Triplets?" he breathed, shaking his head in awe. "Ebony, that's miraculous." She laughed softly, wiping at tears of happiness. "Thank you for believing in me." He returned her smile, and for a moment, it was as if the entire building was lit by the magnitude of this unlikely victory. The treatments would continue, the foundation had its lifeline of funds, and Ebony's dream was coming true in a way no one predicted. Late that night, back at her apartment, Ebony stood near the window, a gentle hand resting against her stomach. Raindrops pattered outside again, though this storm was far gentler than the last. Tasha sat on the couch, sorting through Ebony's stack of medical pamphlets. The phone buzzed with messages of congratulations from newly supportive contacts at the foundation and from strangers moved by her press conference. In the glow of the lamp, Ebony allowed herself a private smile, remembering the cold warnings that once haunted her phone. "Don't get involved with Thompson." All that seemed so distant now. She felt a fierce gratitude for every step of this hard-fought path. She might still face challenges ahead, but for the first time, there was no shred of doubt. She was going to be a mother, 3 times over. She let her eyes drift closed, whispering to herself the quiet truth she once believed was impossible. Tomorrow, new problems might arise: debt, medical complexities, the logistics of carrying triplets. But in that moment, her heart brimmed with a triumphant assurance. Because somehow, despite it all, she'd proven that hope can transform the darkest circumstances into something luminous. As Ebony cradles the ultrasound images, she whispers with triumphant awe, "They said it was impossible. Well, guess we proved them wrong." If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.